I'm sorry, but Westfield Academy simply isn't the right fit for your daughter. The words came out smooth and practiced as Dr. Eleanor Hartwell, admissions director, slid the rejection letter across her mahogany desk. She looked at the black woman and her teenage daughter with polite condescension, completely unaware she was speaking to the philanthropist whose $50 million donation had built half the campus they was sitting on. Let me take you back to 10:30 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday morning in Greenwich, Connecticut, where assumptions about worth would destroy careers and change an institution forever. Dr. Amelia Washington had built her empire on the belief that education could change everything. At 45, she was the founder and CEO of Washington Educational Foundation, one of the largest private education philanthropies in the United States. Her foundation had donated over $500 million to schools across the country, with a specific focus on creating opportunities for underserved communities. The journey to this moment had begun 27 years earlier, when Amelia herself had been rejected by 3 Ivy League schools despite having perfect grades and test scores. Back then, she was told she wouldn't be comfortable in those environments. Back then, there was no recourse, no foundation to challenge discrimination, no voice loud enough to demand change. She had sworn that day that no other qualified student would face what she had faced. She had built her fortune through real estate investments and technology ventures, then dedicated her life to ensuring that educational opportunity was based on merit, not prejudice. But her most personal investment was her own daughter. Zoe Washington, 16, sat quietly beside her mother in the leather chair, her hands folded in her lap. She had a 4.0 GPA, had scored 1580 on her SATs, spoke 3 languages fluently, and had already been accepted to Harvard's early admission program. She played violin with the Connecticut Youth Orchestra, had published research on environmental science, and volunteered 20 hours a week at local community centers. But beyond the impressive statistics was a young woman who had inherited her mother's quiet strength and determination. Zoe had watched her mother build an empire while never forgetting where she came from. She had accompanied Amelia to groundbreaking ceremonies and scholarship award events, understanding from an early age that success carried with it the responsibility to lift others up. Zoe's achievements weren't just personal accomplishments. They were the result of a supportive family environment that valued education above all else. Her mother had ensured she had every advantage: the best tutors, enrichment programs, summer academic camps at MIT and Stanford. But more importantly, Amelia had taught her daughter that excellence was not just about personal success, but about using that success to create opportunities for others. As she sat in that leather chair, Zoe carried with her the hopes and dreams of not just her own family, but of every student her mother's foundation had supported over the years. She was the embodiment of what was possible when talent met opportunity. And today, she was about to discover what happened when opportunity was denied. By any objective measure, Zoe Washington was exactly the kind of student Westfield Academy claimed to want. But objective measures, as they were about to learn, weren't always what mattered most in admissions decisions. Today's meeting at Westfield Academy was supposed to be a formality. Amelia had been funding the school for 8 years, ever since she'd moved to Connecticut. Her foundation had built the new science wing, funded the arts program, and established the scholarship fund that provided full tuition for 50 students each year. The Washington Educational Foundation was listed on every major building, and Amelia herself served on the board of trustees. But she'd never brought Zoe to campus before. She'd never made the connection between her daughter and her philanthropy. Today was meant to change that. She wanted Zoe to attend the school that her mother had helped transform into one of the finest educational institutions in New England. What Amelia didn't expect was that her daughter's skin color would matter more than her achievements or her mother's contributions. Westfield Academy sprawled across 200 acres of Connecticut countryside, its Gothic Revival buildings creating an atmosphere of timeless prestige. Founded in 1847, the school had educated senators, CEOs, and Supreme Court justices. Its endowment exceeded $800 million, much of it contributed by wealthy alumni whose children and grandchildren continued the family tradition. The Washington Foundation's contributions were visible everywhere. The gleaming glass and steel Washington Science Center dominated the South Campus, its laboratories equipped with technology that most universities couldn't afford. The Washington Arts Wing housed state-of-the-art music and theater facilities, including a 500-seat auditorium where world-class performers regularly gave concerts for students. The Washington Library contained over 100,000 volumes and provided students with resources that rivaled many colleges, complete with rare book collections and digital archives that scholars traveled from around the world to access. But as Amelia and Zoe walked through the main lobby, none of the staff seemed to recognize the name on the buildings around them. The irony was not lost on either of them. They were surrounded by monuments to Amelia's generosity, yet were being treated as if they didn't belong. "May I help you?" The receptionist's tone was polite but slightly puzzled, as if she couldn't imagine what business these two black women might have at Westfield Academy. "We have an appointment with Dr. Hartwell, Amelia Washington, and my daughter Zoe." The receptionist checked her computer, frowning slightly. "Oh yes, here it is. Please have a seat. Dr. Hartwell will be with you shortly." 20 minutes passed. Other families came and went, all of them white, all of them greeted with warm smiles and immediate attention. A blonde woman in a tennis outfit was ushered into Dr. Hartwell's office ahead of them, despite arriving later. Her daughter, who appeared to be browsing Instagram on her phone, was welcomed like royalty, while Zoe sat reading a scientific journal she'd brought along. When Amelia politely inquired about the delay, the receptionist offered a vague apology about scheduling complications. But the message was clear. Their time wasn't as valuable as others. Their appointment wasn't as important. Zoe watched this unfold with the sharp intelligence that had earned her admission to Harvard. She was processing not just the delays and dismissals, but the subtle patterns of behavior that revealed the true nature of the institution her mother had supported for years. She squeezed her mother's hand, a silent communication that she understood what was happening and was prepared for whatever came next. Finally, at 11:15 a.m., 45 minutes after their scheduled appointment, Dr. Eleanor Hartwell emerged from her office. Her smile was professional but cool, and she made no apology for the delay. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell had been Westfield Academy's admissions director for 12 years. At 52, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. She had attended Westfield Academy herself, then gone on to Vassar and Yale. Her husband was a partner at a prestigious law firm. Her children were Westfield alumni, and her social circle consisted entirely of people who looked exactly like her. She had developed an instinct for determining which families belonged at Westfield Academy and which did not. It was an instinct that had never failed her until today. "Mrs. Washington, I presume?" Dr. Hartwell extended a perfectly manicured hand. "And this must be Zoe. Please, come into my office." Her office was a monument to Westfield Academy's history and her own achievements. Diplomas lined the walls, photographs showed her with prominent alumni and politicians, and expensive art created an atmosphere of refined taste. Behind her desk, a large window looked out onto the campus quad, where students in blazers and ties moved between classes. "Now then," Dr. Hartwell began, settling behind her desk and opening a manila folder. "I've reviewed Zoe's application, and I must say her academic credentials are quite impressive." Zoe's transcript was indeed remarkable. Perfect grades, advanced placement courses, standardized test scores in the 99th percentile. Her extracurricular activities demonstrated both intellectual curiosity and commitment to community service. Amelia felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She'd heard variations of this speech before, usually from institutions that wanted to reject qualified candidates without explicitly stating their real reasons. "What values are those?" Amelia asked quietly. Dr. Hartwell smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Excellence, tradition, leadership." Westfield Academy has maintained its reputation for 175 years by being very selective about the young people we invite to join our community. What followed was less an interview than an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Dr. Hartwell's questions were carefully crafted to seem reasonable while probing for reasons to exclude Zoe from consideration. "Tell me about your current school, Zoe," Dr. Hartwell began. "I attend Greenwich High School," Zoe replied. "I'm ranked first in my class, and I've taken every AP course they offer." "Greenwich High, public school." Dr. Hartwell made a note. "How do you think you'd adjust to Westfield's more rigorous academic environment?" The question was insulting on multiple levels. Zoe's transcript demonstrated she was already performing at a level that exceeded most Westfield students. Her SAT scores were higher than the school's average. Her course load was more challenging than what many private school students managed. "I think I'd do well," Zoe said diplomatically. "I enjoy challenging myself academically." "And what about socially?" Dr. Hartwell asked. "Westfield Academy has a very particular culture. Our students come from similar backgrounds, share similar experiences. How would you fit into that environment?" Amelia's jaw tightened. The subtext was unmistakable. "You're different, and different doesn't belong here." "Could you be more specific about what you mean by similar backgrounds?" Amelia interjected. Dr. Hartwell's smile became more forced. "Well, most of our families have been part of the Westfield community for generations. There's a shared understanding of our traditions, our expectations. It's not uncommon for us to have third or fourth generation students." "And families without that generational connection?" Amelia pressed. "They sometimes struggle to integrate," Dr. Hartwell replied. "We want all our students to feel comfortable and successful." The conversation continued in this vein for another 20 minutes. Dr. Hartwell questioned Zoe's commitment to extracurricular activities despite her extensive volunteer work. She wondered aloud whether Zoe would be comfortable in Westfield's competitive environment despite her perfect GPA. She asked about family support for academic excellence, as if Zoe's achievements had somehow happened by accident. "I see you've done volunteer work," Dr. Hartwell continued, reviewing the file. "Community centers, I believe. That's very, charitable of you." The word charitable carried a condescending tone, as if Zoe's commitment to serving underserved communities was somehow less impressive than other extracurricular activities. "I believe in giving back," Zoe replied calmly. "My mother has taught me that success means nothing if you don't use it to help others." Yes," Dr. Hartwell murmured, making another note. "And what about your social activities? Do you participate in any clubs or organizations that might help you connect with our student body? I'm president of my school's debate team, captain of the academic decathlon squad, and I've organized 3 charity fundraisers that raised over $50,000 for local nonprofits. Fundraising, Dr. Hartwell repeated, as if this were somehow problematic. And these nonprofits, what kind of causes do they support? Educational opportunities for low-income students primarily, and programs that provide academic support for first-generation college students. Dr. Hartwell's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Here was a student whose passion was helping people like herself succeed, people who didn't traditionally have access to institutions like Westfield Academy. To Dr. Hartwell, this wasn't a selling point. It was a threat to the carefully maintained exclusivity she worked so hard to preserve. "I see," she said, closing the folder with a finality that suggested the interview was over. Finally, Dr. Hartwell closed the folder and folded her hands on her desk. "Zoe, you're clearly a bright young lady with many accomplishments. However, after careful consideration, I don't believe Westfield Academy is the right fit for you." The words hung in the air like a slap. Zoe's face showed a flash of hurt before she carefully composed herself. Amelia felt a familiar rage building in her chest, the same fury she'd felt every time someone had told her she didn't belong, couldn't succeed, wasn't good enough. "May I ask why?" Amelia asked, her voice dangerously calm. Dr. Hartwell slid a formal rejection letter across the desk. "As I mentioned, we're looking for students who will thrive in our particular environment. Sometimes, despite excellent qualifications, there simply isn't a good match." "What specifically makes my daughter a poor match?" Amelia pressed. "Well," she hesitated, "her background is quite different from our typical student body. She might feel isolated, out of place. It wouldn't be fair to put her in that situation." "You're rejecting her to protect her from isolation?" Amelia's voice carried a dangerous edge. "I prefer to think of it as ensuring the best possible educational experience for everyone involved. Perhaps you should consider schools that are more diverse, more aligned with Zoe's background." The coded language was clear. "Go somewhere with other black students. You don't belong here." Amelia Washington had built her career and fortune by remaining calm under pressure, by thinking strategically instead of reacting emotionally. But as she sat in Dr. Hartwell's office, listening to her daughter being rejected from a school that her own money had helped build, that composure was being tested like never before. "Dr. Hartwell," Amelia said, her voice still controlled but carrying unmistakable authority, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, speed dialing a number she knew by heart. "Margaret, it's Amelia Washington. I need you to conference in the legal department immediately. We have a situation at Westfield Academy." Dr. Hartwell's expression shifted from polite condescension to confusion. "Mrs. Washington, Margaret Chen, my chief of staff. Yes, I'm at Westfield Academy right now. I need you to pull all our donation records for this institution. Also, get me the head of school on the line." "Mrs. Washington," Dr. Hartwell said, her voice taking on a slightly nervous edge, "I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish." "Dr. Rebecca Martinez, our general counsel. Yes, we may have a discrimination case. I need you to document everything about today's meeting. And Rebecca, I want you to review our funding agreements with Westfield Academy. All of them." Dr. Hartwell had gone very quiet, watching Amelia with growing unease. "And Margaret," Amelia said, making sure her voice carried clearly in the office, "I want you to calculate exactly how much the Washington Educational Foundation has donated to Westfield Academy over the past 8 years. Include the building contributions, the scholarship fund, the endowment gifts, and the annual operating support." She ended the call and looked directly at Dr. Hartwell.
Now then, Dr. Hartwell, you were saying something about my daughter not being the right fit?
Dr. Hartwell's face had gone pale. Washington Educational Foundation? You're Amelia Washington. Dr. Amelia Washington? Yes. Founder and CEO of the Washington Educational Foundation. Member of the Westfield Academy Board of Trustees, and the woman whose donations built the science center you walked past to get to your office this morning. The realization hit Dr. Hartwell like a physical blow. The Washington Science Center, the Washington Arts Wing, the Washington Library, the Washington Scholarship Fund. Every major improvement to Westfield Academy in the past 8 years bore the name of the woman she had just insulted and dismissed. I had no idea," Dr. Hartwell stammered. "No, you didn't. You saw a black woman and her daughter, and you decided we didn't belong here. You never bothered to ask who we were or what our connection to this school might be. Mrs. Washington, if I had known..." "If you had known what? That I've donated $50 million to this institution? That would have changed your assessment of my daughter's qualifications?" Dr. Hartwell opened and closed her mouth, struggling for words. "Let me be very clear," Amelia continued, her voice gaining strength. "My daughter's SAT scores are higher than your school average. Her GPA is perfect. She speaks 3 languages, conducts scientific research, and has already been accepted to Harvard. By any objective measure, she is exactly the kind of student Westfield Academy should be competing to recruit." "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Washington. I apologize. But instead of recognizing her achievements, you questioned whether she would fit in with your community. You suggested she might be more comfortable at a more diverse school. You rejected her not because she wasn't qualified, but because she was black." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Amelia's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She answered it and put it on speakerphone. "Dr. Washington, this is Margaret. I have the numbers you requested." "Go ahead, Margaret." "The Washington Educational Foundation has donated $68.7 million to Westfield Academy over the past 8 years. This includes $30 million for the Science Center, $15 million for the Arts Wing, $12 million for the library renovation, $8 million for the Scholarship Fund, and $3.7 million in annual operating support." Dr. Hartwell's face had gone from pale to ashen. She was staring at Amelia as if seeing her for the first time. "Additionally," Margaret continued, "our scholarship fund currently supports 127 students at Westfield Academy. Without our funding, these students would not be able to attend. The endowment contribution represents approximately 8.5% of the school's total endowment." "Thank you, Margaret. And what about our ongoing commitments?" "We have pledged an additional $25 million over the next 5 years for campus improvements and program expansion. We also fund 30% of the school's need-based financial aid program. Dr. Washington, I should also mention that 3 board members have called asking about rumors of a problem at Westfield. Word is already beginning to spread through our donor network." The implications hit Dr. Hartwell like a freight train. Not only had she just insulted the school's largest donor, but news of this disaster was already reaching other philanthropists and board members. The reputation she had spent 12 years building was crumbling in real time. Dr. Hartwell looked like she might be sick. Her hands were trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. "Dr. Washington," Margaret added, "I also have Dr. Phillips on the line." Dr. Jonathan Phillips, head of school at Westfield Academy, came on the speakerphone. "Amelia, Margaret said there was some kind of emergency. Is everything all right?" "Jonathan, I'm sitting in Dr. Hartwell's office with my daughter Zoe. Dr. Hartwell has just informed us that Zoe is not the right fit for Westfield Academy. There was a long pause on the phone. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Dr. Hartwell has rejected my daughter's application. She feels that Zoe, despite her perfect grades and 1580 SAT score, would not thrive in Westfield's environment. There must be some mistake, Dr. Phillips said, his voice tight with concern. Dr. Hartwell, are you there? Yes, sir, Dr. Hartwell managed to whisper. Could you please explain to me why you rejected the application of Dr. Washington's daughter? Dr. Hartwell looked like she was drowning. There were concerns about cultural fit. Cultural fit? Dr. Phillips' voice had gone dangerously quiet. You rejected the daughter of our largest donor because of cultural fit? What happened next unfolded with the swift precision of an institution protecting itself from a catastrophic mistake. Dr. Hartwell, Dr. Phillips said through the phone, you're suspended from your position effective immediately. Please gather your personal items and leave campus. Security will escort you out. Dr. Phillips, Dr. Hartwell said desperately, if I could just explain. There's nothing to explain, Dr. Phillips replied coldly. You've potentially destroyed relations that took years to build. You've discriminated against a student based on race, and you've insulted one of the most important philanthropists in our school's history. Within 15 minutes, campus security had arrived at Dr. Hartwell's office. The woman who had been so confident and condescending an hour earlier was now gathering family photos and personal items from her desk drawers. Her career at Westfield Academy ended in disgrace. Dr. Phillips himself arrived shortly after, practically running across campus from his office. He was a tall, distinguished man in his early 60s, and his face was flushed with embarrassment and anger. Amelia, I cannot begin to apologize for what has happened here today. This is absolutely not representative of Westfield Academy's values or policies, isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like your policies. My daughter was judged not on her achievements, but on her appearance. You're absolutely right to be furious, and I want you to know that we're going to conduct a full investigation into our admissions practices. This cannot happen again.
What Dr. Phillips discovered over the next week shocked even him. Dr. Hartwell's discriminatory practices weren't isolated incidents. They were systematic patterns that had been in place for years. A review of admissions data revealed troubling statistics. Over the past 5 years, qualified minority applicants had been rejected at 3 times the rate of white applicants with similar credentials. The reasons given were consistently vague: cultural fit, alignment with school values, concerns about integration. Internal emails recovered from Dr. Hartwell's computer were even more damning. Messages to admissions staff included phrases like "maintain our standards," "protect our community," and "preserve our traditions," all coded language for keeping Black and Hispanic students out of Westfield Academy. One particular email thread from 6 months earlier was especially revealing. When an admissions counselor had questioned the rejection of a qualified Black student, Dr. Hartwell had responded, "We need to be careful about changing the composition of our student body too quickly. Alumni and donors expect a certain type of student when they visit campus." Another email showed Dr. Hartwell instructing staff to be creative with rejection reasons for minority applicants, suggesting phrases like "not a good match for our community" and "concerns about social integration." Most shocking of all, Dr. Hartwell had maintained an informal diversity quota that limited minority enrollment to less than 5% of each class, despite receiving numerous qualified applications from students of color. She had justified this policy by claiming it was necessary to maintain alumni satisfaction and donation levels. The investigation also revealed that several staff members had tried to raise concerns about these practices over the years, but their complaints had been dismissed or ignored. 2 admissions counselors had actually resigned in protest, but their exit interviews had been buried in personnel files and never reviewed by senior administration. Dr. Phillips also discovered that Dr. Hartwell had deliberately excluded minority applicants from recruitment events and campus visits, ensuring that prospective donors and alumni would see a student body that matched their expectations rather than the school's stated commitment to diversity.
Dr. Phillips called an emergency meeting of the Board of Trustees, presenting his findings and recommending immediate action. The board, horrified by the legal and ethical implications of what had been happening under their watch, voted unanimously to implement sweeping reforms. First, Dr. Hartwell was permanently terminated, along with 2 other admissions staff members who had participated in the discriminatory practices. Their severance packages were canceled, and the school's legal team began preparing for potential wrongful termination lawsuits, confident that the evidence of discrimination would protect the school's decision. Second, the school hired Dr. Marcus Johnson, a nationally recognized expert in educational diversity and inclusion, as the new head of admissions. Dr. Johnson had previously worked at Phillips Exeter Academy and Harvard University, transforming their admissions processes to focus purely on merit and potential. His first action was to personally review every rejected application from the past 3 years, identifying qualified minority students who had been unfairly denied admission. Third, Westfield Academy implemented blind admissions reviews for all academic credentials, ensuring that decisions were based solely on achievements and qualifications, not on names, photos, or background information that might reveal an applicant's race or ethnicity. Personal interviews would only occur after academic merit had been established. Fifth, the board mandated that all admissions staff undergo extensive bias training and established an anonymous reporting system for anyone who witnessed discriminatory practices. Monthly reviews would track admissions patterns to ensure that unconscious bias wasn't affecting decisions. Sixth, Westfield Academy committed to increasing its minority enrollment to at least 30% within 3 years, not through quotas, but through aggressive outreach to qualified students who had previously been discouraged from applying. The transformation wasn't just administrative, it was cultural. The board recognized that Dr. Hartwell's attitudes had been enabled by a system that prioritized alumni comfort over institutional integrity. They committed to having difficult conversations with donors and alumni about the school's values and future direction.
2 weeks after that terrible morning in Dr. Hartwell's office, Zoe Washington received a phone call from Dr. Phillips himself. "Zoe, I'm calling to personally invite you to join the Westfield Academy class of 2025. Furthermore, I'd like to offer you our highest academic scholarship and a position in our advanced research program." Zoe, who had maintained her composure throughout the entire ordeal, finally allowed herself to smile. "There's one more thing," Dr. Phillips added. "We'd like to name you as our first Washington Scholar, a designation that will be given annually to the student who best exemplifies academic excellence and community leadership." But the real victory came 6 months later, during Zoe's first semester at Westfield Academy. She quickly established herself as one of the top students in her class, won a national science competition, and was elected to student government.
More importantly, her presence opened doors for other qualified minority students who had previously been excluded. The Washington Scholarship Program, funded by Amelia's foundation, now supported 50 students each year, and for the first time in Westfield Academy's history, the student body began to reflect the diversity of the surrounding community. News of the Westfield Academy scandal broke 3 days after Dr. Hartwell's termination, when a former admissions counselor contacted a reporter from the Hartford Courant. The story quickly gained national attention, particularly when details of Amelia Washington's $68.7 million in donations became public. "Donor confronts school's hidden discrimination," read the headline in the New York Times. The story was picked up by CNN, NPR, and eventually went viral on social media. The contrast between Zoe's exceptional qualifications and her initial rejection sparked outrage across educational communities. Parents began sharing their own stories of qualified children being rejected from elite schools for vague reasons. Educators started questioning whether similar patterns existed at their own institutions. Civil rights organizations demanded investigations at other private schools. The media coverage wasn't entirely positive. Some critics argued that Amelia had used her wealth to bully the school into reversing its decision. Others questioned whether Zoe would have been admitted if her mother hadn't been a major donor. But Amelia addressed these criticisms head-on in a television interview with Anderson Cooper. "My daughter was qualified regardless of my donations," she said calmly. "The question isn't whether she deserved admission. Her transcripts and test scores answer that. The question is whether other equally qualified students have been denied opportunities because they didn't have someone with resources to fight for them." The interview clip became one of the most shared education-related videos of the year. Amelia's composed dignity in the face of criticism, combined with her clear articulation of the broader issues at stake, shifted public opinion decisively in her favor. Dr. Hartwell, meanwhile, made the mistake of granting her own interview to a local television station, ostensibly to defend her record. The interview was a disaster. When asked about specific cases of rejected minority students, she became defensive and evasive. When pressed about her email communications, she claimed they had been taken out of context. Her performance only reinforced the impression that she had been operating from prejudice rather than professional judgment.
5 years later, Westfield Academy had one of the most diverse and academically excellent student bodies in New England. The school's reputation had been enhanced, not damaged, by its commitment to true meritocracy. Alumni donations increased as graduates saw their school living up to its highest ideals. Many alumni privately admitted they had suspected problems with the admissions process, but hadn't known how to address them. The success stories were remarkable. Students from all backgrounds were thriving academically and socially. The Washington Scholarship recipients consistently ranked among the top performers in their classes. College admission rates to Ivy League schools actually improved as the student body became more diverse, partly because universities valued Westfield's genuine commitment to excellence over exclusivity. Dr. Amelia Washington continued to serve on the Board of Trustees, ensuring that the reforms she had fought for remained permanent. She also expanded her foundation's work, creating a national database of discriminatory education practices and working with civil rights organizations to identify and address systemic barriers to educational opportunity. The Washington Center for Educational Excellence became a model for strategic philanthropy, demonstrating how donors could use their influence not just to fund programs, but to ensure those programs served their intended purpose. Amelia began speaking at conferences about accountability philanthropy, The idea that major donors have a responsibility to monitor how their contributions are used and to demand measurable progress towards stated goals. Zoe Washington, now a successful engineer and entrepreneur, established her own scholarship fund for students facing educational discrimination. But her most important contribution was simply being present on campus during her years at Westfield. Her academic achievements, leadership roles, and general excellence made it impossible for anyone to argue that diversity compromised standards. She often spoke at schools and conferences, sharing her story and encouraging others to persevere in the face of prejudice. Her message was consistent. Excellence speaks for itself, but sometimes it needs to speak very loudly to be heard. The ripple effects extended far beyond Westfield Academy. Other private schools began examining their own admissions practices, fearful of facing similar revelations. Educational consultants started advising schools on how to identify and eliminate unconscious bias in their processes. The Westfield Standard became shorthand for admissions practices that were both rigorous and fair. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell's fall of grace became a cautionary tale throughout the education world. Her name was synonymous with the dangers of allowing personal prejudices to override institutional values. Several other private schools quietly terminated admissions directors whose practices bore similarities to hers, preferring to address problems proactively rather than face public scandals. 10 years after that devastating morning in Dr. Hartwell's office, the transformation was complete and permanent. Westfield Academy had become a case study in successful institutional reform, taught in business schools and education programs as an example of how organizations could confront and overcome systemic bias. The Washington Center for Educational Excellence had expanded into a national consulting firm, helping schools across the country implement fair and effective admissions processes. Dr. Marcus Johnson had been promoted to Dean of Students, overseeing not just admissions, but the entire student experience. More importantly, the culture of the school had fundamentally changed. Students from all backgrounds felt welcomed and supported. The diversity wasn't just numerical, it was meaningful, creating a learning environment where different perspectives and experiences enhanced everyone's education. The annual Washington Lecture Series brought speakers from all fields to campus, but they shared a common theme: the power of merit-based opportunity to transform individuals and institutions. Zoe Washington herself delivered the keynote address on the 10th anniversary of her acceptance, reflecting on how a moment of discrimination had become a catalyst for lasting positive change. My mother could have used her influence to get me admitted and left it at that. Instead, she chose to use that moment to ensure that no other qualified student would face what I faced. That's the difference between privilege and progress. Privilege gets you through the door, but progress holds the door open for everyone who comes after you.
5 years later, Westfield Academy had one of the most diverse and academically excellent student bodies in New England. The school's reputation had been enhanced, not damaged, by its commitment to true meritocracy. Alumni donations increased as graduates saw their school living up to its highest ideals. Many alumni privately admitted they had suspected problems with the admissions process, but hadn't known how to address them. The success stories were remarkable. Students from all backgrounds were thriving academically and socially. The Washington Shia Scholarship recipients consistently ranked among the top performers in their classes. College admission rates to Ivy League schools actually improved as the student body became more diverse, partly because universities valued Westfield's genuine commitment to excellence over exclusivity. Dr. Amelia Washington continued to serve on the Board of Trustees, ensuring that the reforms she had fought for remained permanent. She also expanded her foundation's work, creating a national database of discriminatory education practices and working with civil rights organizations to identify and address systemic barriers to educational opportunity. The Washington Educational Foundation became a model for strategic philanthropy, demonstrating how donors could use their influence not just to fund programs, but to ensure those programs served their intended purpose. Amelia began speaking at conferences about accountability philanthropy, the idea that major donors have a responsibility to monitor how their contributions are used and to demand measurable progress toward stated goals. Zoe Washington, now a successful engineer and entrepreneur, established her own scholarship fund for students facing educational discrimination. But her most important contribution was simply being present on campus during her years at Westfield. Her academic achievements, leadership roles, and general excellence made it impossible for anyone to argue that diversity compromised standards. She often spoke at schools and conferences, sharing her story and encouraging others to persevere in the face of prejudice. Her message was consistent. Excellence speaks for itself, but sometimes it needs to speak very loudly to be heard. The ripple effects extended far beyond Westfield Academy. Other private schools began examining their own admissions practices, fearful of facing similar revelations. Educational consultants started advising schools on how to identify and eliminate unconscious bias in their processes. The Westfield Standard became shorthand for admissions practices that were both rigorous and fair. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell's fall from grace became a cautionary tale throughout the education world. Her name was synonymous with the dangers of allowing personal prejudices to override institutional values. Several other private schools quietly terminated admissions directors whose practices bore similarities to hers, preferring to address problems proactively rather than face public scandals. The lesson of that terrible morning had rippled outward, creating positive change that extended far beyond one family or one school. Sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination is not anger or revenge, but the patient, determined work of creating a system where everyone is judged by their merit and potential. Justice, it turned out, wasn't just about consequences for those who did wrong. It was about building a world where doing wrong became impossible, where respect and opportunity were available to everyone, regardless of the color of their skin or the assumptions others might make about their worth. And in the gleaming halls of Westfield Academy, where portraits of distinguished alumni now included faces of every color and background, that lesson lived on in every student who walked through the doors, knowing they belonged there, not because of their family's wealth or connections, but because of their own achievements and dreams. The words that had started it all, "I'm sorry, but Westfield Academy simply isn't the right fit for your daughter," had become a powerful reminder of how far the school had come and how important it was never to go back. Because, in the end, excellence has no color, potential recognizes no boundaries, and dignity belongs to everyone who walks through the door seeking nothing more than the chance to prove what they can achieve. If this story moved you, remember that change happens when good people refuse to accept discrimination as just the way things are. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and never forget that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply insist on being treated with the respect you deserve. Because every student deserves to be judged by their achievements, not their appearance. Every family deserves to be welcomed, not dismissed. And every institution has the power to choose between perpetuating prejudice and creating opportunity. The choice, as always, is ours to make.